Long before the rise of the Roman Empire, long before the first bronze tools were hammered into shape across the British Isles, a colossal engineering project began to take shape on the windswept plains of Wiltshire. Stonehenge is not merely a collection of weathered stones standing in a lonely field. It is a monumental archive of prehistoric human ambition, astronomical precision, and shifting cultural landscapes. To understand Stonehenge is to trace the evolution of ancient society, from nomadic tribal groups into an organized civilization capable of moving multi-ton monoliths across rivers, hills, and open plains. The landscape before the stones. The story of Stonehenge begins long before the first sarsen stone was ever dragged into place. The chalk downlands of Salisbury Plain were already a sacred landscape to the hunter-gatherer communities of the Mesolithic period, thousands of years before farming ever reached Britain. Archaeologists have discovered the post holes of three massive pine totem poles dating back to roughly 8000 BCE, positioned beneath what is now the modern visitor center car park. Nobody knows for certain what these posts once represented, and the debate around them has never fully settled. Some researchers see territorial markers meant to claim a hunting ground, others see something closer to a ceremonial gathering point, a place returned to again and again across many human generations. What the post holes do prove, beyond dispute, is that this particular stretch of chalk downland held meaning for people thousands of years before anyone thought to raise a stone here at all. As the British Isles transitioned into the Neolithic era, the local population shifted from a nomadic lifestyle towards settled farming. Forests were gradually cleared, and the rolling chalk hills became open grassland, used for grazing livestock and growing cereal crops. It was within this newly reshaped agricultural landscape that the monumental phase of construction on Salisbury Plain truly began. The earliest physical form of Stonehenge was not stone at all, but earth and timber. A vast circular enclosure built to separate a sacred ritual space from the ordinary world just outside it. Phase 1, the Great Enclosure and the Aubrey Holes. Around 3000 BCE, the builders of early Neolithic Britain laid out the first definitive design of Stonehenge. This initial phase involved digging a massive circular ditch and bank using tools crafted from red deer antlers and the shoulder blades of oxen. The resulting ditch measured roughly 100 meters across, with a low bank rising along its inner edge. Just inside that ditch, the builders dug a precise ring of 56 chalk pits known today as the Aubrey Holes, named for the 17th-century antiquarian John Aubrey, who first recorded them. Their exact purpose remained a subject of fierce academic debate for generations. Excavation eventually revealed that the holes were initially used to hold upright wooden posts, or possibly standing stones, and were later repurposed as cremation burials. That detail matters enormously, because it means that from its very earliest phase, Stonehenge was already bound up with death, ancestry, and remembrance, centuries before a single sarsen stone arrived on the plain. During this same period, the famous heel stone, a massive, unworked sarsen boulder weighing more than 30 tons, was raised just outside the main entrance to the enclosure. Aligned roughly with the summer solstice sunrise, the heel stone became a permanent marker, anchoring the monument's axis to the cyclical rhythms of the sky above it. Phase 2, the Timber Mystery. Following the construction of the earthwork enclosure, Stonehenge entered a period of architectural experimentation that remains one of its strangest chapters. Sometime around 2500 BCE, the site underwent a dramatic transformation through the large-scale introduction of timber architecture. Deep holes were cut into the chalk inside the enclosure to support dozens of massive wooden posts, arranged in patterns that modern archaeologists are still mapping today using ground-penetrating radar and careful excavation. Why a society that had already begun experimenting with stone would turn back to timber is a genuine puzzle, and researchers remain divided on the answer. Some historians argue that wood and stone carried distinct symbolic meanings for Neolithic Britons, timber standing for life, growth, and the impermanence of the mortal world, while stone represented eternity, ancestry, and the world of the dead. Under this reading, Stonehenge's builders may have been constructing a landscape of two halves. A realm of the living, built in wood, set against a realm of the ancestors, built to last in stone. Others take a more practical view, suggesting the timber structures served as staging areas, scaffolding platforms, or covered ceremonial spaces used while the final plans for the stone monument were still being worked out. A smaller group of researchers has pointed to the closely related timber circles at nearby Durrington Walls as evidence that timber monuments were never meant to be temporary at all, but were considered just as richly significant as stone in their own right, simply serving different ceremonial purposes. Whatever the true reason, the timber phase proved relatively short-lived. The posts eventually rotted where they stood or were deliberately removed to clear the ground for the monumental stone architecture that defines the site today. Phase 3, the arrival of the giants. The most ambitious and visually striking phase of construction began around 2500 BCE, marking the arrival of two entirely different types of stone, the colossal sarsens and the smaller, far more mysterious bluestones. The logistics required to gather, transport, and shape these geological monoliths stand as one of the true masterpieces of prehistoric engineering anywhere in the world. The giant sarsen stones, the uprights and lintels that form the iconic outer circle and the central horseshoe, came from the Marlborough Downs, roughly 25 miles to the north. These massive blocks of silcrete weigh between 20 and 30 tons apiece. Moving them across undulating terrain, without wheeled transport and with heavy draft animals not yet in wide use for this kind of labor in Britain, required hundreds of people working in careful coordination, relying on wooden sledges, log rollers, greased trackways, and enormous earthen ramps built specifically to ease the stones into position. Even more remarkable is the journey made by the bluestones, smaller igneous rocks that form the inner horseshoe and circle. Geological analysis has traced their origin to the Preseli Hills in Pembrokeshire, Wales, more than 140 miles away. Whether these stones traveled primarily overland or were rafted along coastal and river routes remains debated among archaeologists, but either way, their journey stands as one of the most astonishing logistical feats attempted anywhere in the ancient world. That such a specific, distant mountain range was chosen, rather than any of the far closer sources of usable stone, strongly suggests these particular rocks carried spiritual or ancestral significance for the people who moved them. Durrington Walls, the village of the builders. A few miles northeast of Stonehenge lies a site that has reshaped how archaeologists understand the monument entirely. Durrington Walls, a vast Neolithic settlement believed to have housed the very people who built Stonehenge itself. Excavations here have uncovered the remains of timber houses, hearths, and enormous quantities of discarded animal bone, much of it from pigs slaughtered at roughly 9 months old, an age pattern that points strongly toward large midwinter feasting events rather than routine, year-round subsistence eating. Isotope analysis of both the animal bones and the human remains found at Durrington Walls has produced one of the most striking findings in the whole Stonehenge story. The chemical signatures locked into cattle teeth recovered from the site show that some of these animals were raised as far away as the Scottish Highlands, hundreds of miles to the north, and then driven on foot all the way to Salisbury Plain. That evidence transformed Stonehenge from a purely local monument into something closer to a seasonal capital, a place that drew people, livestock, and resources from across a huge stretch of Britain for major communal gatherings tied to the turning of the seasons. Architecture and engineering ingenuity. Stonehenge is not merely a pile of stones. It is a masterclass in prehistoric stonemasonry, one that translates sophisticated woodworking techniques directly into stone. The horizontal lintels that top the outer sarsen circle were locked together using mortise and tenon joints, with carved projections on the upright stones fitting neatly into hollows cut into the underside of each lintel. The vertical faces of adjoining lintels were further shaped with tongue-and groove joints, allowing them to form a single continuous, stable ring capable of withstanding wind, shifting ground, and the passage of thousands of years. The stones were even subtly shaped to correct for optical illusion. The uprights were chiseled slightly wider near the top than at the base, a technique known as entasis, ensuring that from a human viewpoint standing on the ground, the massive monoliths would appear straight, balanced, and perfectly proportioned against the wide, flat horizon of Salisbury Plain. Astronomy and cosmic alignments. From the earliest days of modern antiquarian study, researchers noticed that Stonehenge was deliberately aligned with the movements of the sun. The monument's primary axis runs along a northeast to southwest line, framing both the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunset within a single, carefully calculated sightline. On the longest day of the year, an observer standing at the center of the monument and looking out through the main entrance would watch the sun rise directly over the heel stone. On the shortest day of the year, the same axis works in reverse. The setting sun aligns with the grand central trilithon horseshoe, framing the winter twilight in a dramatic interplay of shadow and stone. In the 1960s, the astronomer Gerald Hawkins ignited a fierce academic controversy by proposing, in a paper published in Nature, that Stonehenge functioned as a sophisticated prehistoric computer, capable of predicting solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable precision. The claim captured global public imagination, but it did not hold up well under scrutiny from professional archaeologists, who argued that Hawkins had cherry-picked alignments from among the monument's many stones and post holes, treating any near match to an astronomical event as evidence of deliberate design. Most archaeologists today view Stonehenge primarily as a sacred theater rather than a scientific instrument. The solstices marked genuinely critical turning points in the agricultural calendar, signaling the change of seasons and the rhythm of planting and harvest, and gatherings at the site likely served to reinforce tribal bonds, settle disputes, honor the dead, and appeal to the forces controlling fertility and the harvest, all through synchronized feasting and ritual. The people of the Beaker culture. The completion of the stone monument coincided with a sweeping cultural shift across Britain. The arrival of the Beaker culture, which brought with it the knowledge of metallurgy, early copper and bronze working, and a distinctive new style of pottery that had originated on the European continent. The landscape surrounding Stonehenge transformed into a vast necropolis. Hundreds of round burial mounds, known as barrows, were raised across Salisbury Plain during the early Bronze Age. People buried near Stonehenge were often interred with rich grave goods. Gold ornaments, copper daggers, amber beads, and finely made ceramic drinking vessels. One especially famous burial discovered nearby belongs to a man now known as the Amesbury Archer, who grew up somewhere in the region of modern-day Switzerland or Austria before migrating to Britain around 2300 BCE. The richness of his grave goods shows that even in deep prehistory, Salisbury Plain functioned as a genuinely cosmopolitan hub, tied into networks of long-distance trade, migration, and cultural exchange stretching across much of Europe. Decline, abandonment, and later history. By around 1500 BCE, the monumental phase of Stonehenge had come to an end. British society was changing, and the focus of ritual life shifted away from massive communal stone monuments and toward individual burial and smaller, more scattered sacred sites. Stonehenge slowly fell into disuse, though it never entirely vanished from the landscape or from memory. During the Roman occupation of Britain, visitors left coins and pottery at the site, suggesting it was already treated as a curiosity, or perhaps a roadside shrine, centuries after its builders were gone. In the medieval period, new myths grew up to explain a monument nobody any longer understood. The 12th century chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth popularized the legend that the wizard Merlin had magically transported the stones from Ireland as a memorial to slain British lords, a story that captured the medieval imagination and persisted, in one form or another, for centuries afterward. Modern preservation and global legacy. As the centuries passed, Stonehenge suffered from neglect, vandalism, and the steady theft of stone fragments by local villagers in search of building material. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that systematic archaeological excavation finally began to reconstruct its true history, its construction phases, and the techniques behind it. In 1918, the site was formally given to the British nation by its private owner, Sir Cecil Chubb, who had purchased it at auction as a gift for his wife just 3 years earlier. Today, Stonehenge stands protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, managed by English Heritage, and drawing more than 1 million visitors every year from every corner of the globe. Stonehenge endures because it embodies something close to a universal human impulse. The desire to leave a mark upon the earth, to connect the fleeting span of a single life with the permanent cycles of the cosmos, and to work across generations towards something far larger than any one person could ever build alone.